Well, I knew it was going to come to this eventually. Well, actually, no, not really. Just this is since we're going through a list of all of the important people in Chris's life, or trolls, or if you can't want to count these as real people anyway. But well, now we come to the apple of Chris's eye. Unfortunately, but oh god, you know what? Some people would have said absolutely that this would have made Chris an OA pedo, but well, yeah, actually that's it. He's an OA pedo. That's what we're calling. But Chris is no doubt desperate for a gum job if ever there was one. That's the last time I'm going to be making a. If you've never seen the show In-Betweeners before, you should. It's a fantastic. I could just go watch that right now once this is over. But literally, Barbara Chandler. So we've got a lot of things to disclose first of all. So prepare, because this one's going to be probably as long, if not longer, than Barbara Chandler. Well, then her husband Bob. But let's go anyway. Note on credibility. Barbara Chandler has been deemed to be an unreliable narrator for the following reasons. Barb has a long history manipulating people. True. She might also have dementia or some other cognitive disability, unconfirmed, so we can't say if she does or does not. Alternatively, she may be faking dementia symptoms on camera. Bear this in mind and use healthy skepticism when taking statements from the subject being discussed. Chris's recent failings have helped Quickie gather more information about this article. And a lot of these, the new information can be found from the following sources: the place chats from December, calling Barbara Barbie or something like that, the place chats from Project S&T, browsing Kiwi Farms, an honest self-portrait from himself in June of 2021, and letters from jail, as well as the post sightings. And also a fairly healthy and long note from the Quickie, so here it goes. Barb has not been confirmed to have dementia. News articles, videos, and posts often state that she does without a source. However, there has been no known medical diagnosis. It is impossible to diagnose Barb simply from her appearance in Chris's videos, as these are begging videos in which she may be playing up symptoms for the camera, and she has a well-known history for manipulating people. Multiple people who have interacted with her off-camera have reported that she is completely mentally sound, and she is known to drive and do other things not commonly done by people with dementia. On the other hand, Chris called Barb zombie-like in his jail letters, and she has gotten into at least one major car accident in recent years. Ultimately, it is impossible to know for sure, and while theorization is okay, it is ideal not to confirm or deny it on this wiki without further evidence. Did you get all that, guys? Because, well, it's going to be very, very important later on, so here we go. I am close to my mother, but I would advise some space between you and your mother, and I recommend finding yourself a girlfriend sweetheart to remain within you for later years of life. Mama's not going to be around forever. Chris feigns giving advice to a Solitude fan. Meanwhile, she threatens to kill me in her episode of Emotional Rage, Chris on Bob, and Barbara was more of a guilty pleasure waifu. Chris role-playing as Magi-chan, demonstrating his odious complex. And, well, here she is in all her splendor, I suppose. Ew. Barbara, or Barb Ann Chandler, nee Weston, formerly Yates and Smithy, was born on the 1st of October 1941, is the widow of Bob Chandler and the mother of Christian Weston Chandler and Cole Smithy. The sole recognition for her motherly qualities is the Mother of the Year 2000 award created for her. She has not won the award since. Yikes. Because wasn't the year 2000 the same year that Barbara was going to cook a spaghetti dinner for Bob and Chris, and when they said no, she decided she was never going to cook for them ever again? Or something. Maybe that was the grudge Chris was holding for all these years. Though Bob has remained relatively popular with trolls and Christorians alike, the same cannot be said for Barbara, who has been consistently disliked by nearly everyone but Chris and her late husband, with many members of her own family distancing themselves from at least for her at least since at least the funeral of one of Chris's aunts. whereas Bob eventually recognized his shortcomings as a parent to Chris and attempted to correct them late into his life. Barbara has consistently been one of the biggest enablers of Chris's bad behavior since he was a child. On top of emotionally manipulating, threatening, and on occasion physically abusing him, elements which Chris would turn around and use on her late in her life, Barbara has been instrumental in turning Chris into the spoiled man-child that he is, and like Bob before her, has encouraged him not to seek a serious career path in favour of getting welfare off of his condition, in spite of the fact that he could get a minimum wage job and still qualify for welfare. It has long been suspected that she has some form of narcissistic personality disorder, which goes hand in hand with what we know about her neglectful to abusive relationship with Chris, along with his half-brother Cole Smithy, who received a much worse treatment from her. Her hoarding habits also indirectly led to the 2014 house fire, as sparks from a coffee Keurig maker had no business being plugged into an extension cord in the bathroom, burned the paper plastic and wood in the room before engulfing the house, and much of the financial crisis is subsequently on her. Now, technically yes, that's true, but for reasons I will go into later on, ladies and gentlemen, is that I blame both of them personally, but what can you say? For much of the classic era of Christery, Barbara was extremely obese and napped a lot, earning her the nickname Snorlax, after the fat, sleepy Pokemon of the same name. But she has since shed a ton of weight in her twilight years. This sharp loss of weight, loss of hair colour, and knowledge of her son's status as a living internet meme all factored into her role in appearing in multiple begging videos. On the 27th of June 2021, Chris began an incestuous relationship with Barbara, claiming to have sex every 3 nights. A month later, on the 27th of July 2021, Chris decided to brag about the identity of his sexual partner in a call over the Signal app and in text messages the following day. The material was leaked to the general public at approximately past midnight on the 30th of July. Later that morning, a welfare check was conducted at 14 Branch Lane Court, and as a result, Chris was banned from the house and from contact with Barbara for a week, and Barbara was sent to the hospital for a senior care inspection. On the 1st of August, Chris was arrested at a motel in Richmond and charged with incest. Barbara returned to her residence at some point in August 2021, and in an October 2021 letter to a fan, Chris mentioned that he had received a letter from Barbara during his stay in jail. In November 2021, Barbara failed to yield the right-of-way while driving and was injured in a car crash from which she suffered 2 broken ribs and a concussion, and her van was wrecked, and she was helped to recover from it by extended family members. Barbara and Chris no longer live together, with Barbara continuing to reside in Ruckersville and Chris moving to Big Island, Virginia. Which, given we know about Chris's frame, I guess you could say, is not necessarily... He is in the middle of a really big island, alright. Spelling of name. Interestingly, this is the first thing we have to cover, but there you are. Barbara's high school yearbook and both her marriage licenses spell her full maiden name as Barbara Ann Weston, as do other sources like Harvey Power's genealogical website. Her divorce decree omits the middle name entirely. Chris, however, usually, no, not consistently, spells her name as Barbara Ann Weston Chandler with an E. This may be because he believes she is named after Anne Boleyn. Yeah, and we know how all that ended for Anne Boleyn, though. Early life. Her life was a redneck, simple country one. She had mastered sewing, mending, and making clothes and other farm life facets and church-going habits. Chris describes his own mother's childhood, apparently. Barbara is the 5th child out of 8 of Joseph Otto Joe Weston, a longtime farmer and a veteran of the First World War, from 1896 to 1955, and Carrie Edna Wynne, a housewife and later a hotel worker, born in 1911 and died in 1967. They married in February 1927, when Carrie was 15 years old and Joseph was 30. Yikes. They lied about their ages in their marriage certificate. Joe died in 1955 after falling from a horse-drawn wagon. Barbara's maternal grandfather was an alcoholic moonshiner who carried out affairs and failed to provide even the most basic support for her mother's family. For whatever reason, Barb believes that she is descended from Anne Boleyn, but this is impossible given that Elizabeth I, Boleyn's only daughter, died without an heir. She also thinks that a more recent ancestor named Daniel Weston boarded the Mayflower, but no such person exists. Barb grew up in a low-income farming household in Red Oak, Virginia, a rural area in the far south of the state. An early memory from when she was 2 years old was seeing her father covered in silver paint, having fallen off the roof of their house while painting it and nearly killed himself. What a memory, eh? She graduated from Randolph Henry High School in Charlotte Courthouse, Virginia in 1960. Due to family poverty, she was obliged to sew her own clothing. While at Randolph Henry, she was treasurer of the school's chapter of the Future Housemakers of America, a reporter of the Randolph Henry Safety Bus Patrol, a typist for her high school yearbook, the Log, and a member of the Spanish Club. She was also a member of many other school organizations, suggesting that she was very involved in extracurricular activities while in high school. She was also known for her perfect attendance record from her sophomore through her senior years of high school. According to her senior yearbook, her nickname in high school was Bobcat. Barb had 2 boyfriends in high school, one of whom was Tom Ashby, who would later marry her younger sister Harriet. It's becoming a bit of a theme, this, isn't it? According to a Facebook status Chris wrote on the 29th of January 2012, Barbara lost her virginity during her high school years. Why Chris knows this is anyone's guess, although it's possible that he learned the basic principles of honest content from Mommy Dearest. In a letter from the 10th of May 2022, however, Chris denies that Barbara ever had sex with her high school boyfriends, although he claims that her sisters accused her of doing so. Strangely enough, that both Barb and Bob both came from families that had at least 8 siblings. According to a leaked message to Bella, Barbara has had sex with 8 different men over the course of her life, not including Chris. Chris claims that she told him that she has never Ed. Shortly after graduating from high school in 1960, Barb left Red Oak and decided to set off on her own in search for romance and her future. Apparently, she left in order to go to college, breaking off her relationship with Tom, who was 1 year her junior. After Barb moved away, her siblings, cousins, and others in Red Oak began to spread rumors about her and call her a slut in her absence. Around this time, her mother also disowned her. As it turned out, her relationship with her family would never get much better. You mean to tell me it was ever that good in the first place? Barb's relationship with Harriet and Tom is especially strained. Chris stated in a leaked video that he and his mother are not liked by members of the Weston family who have outlived Karina. I mean, I'd say Barb and Bob is maybe fair enough. Chris, well, at least since Chris, well, maybe like post 2000 Chris, it might be easier to suggest, but according to, now again, I'm not saying, Barbara, I'm not saying that Barbara is, that, what I'm saying is that, damn, there must have been a lot more to this than probably I was expecting, because, Jesus. According to Chris, Barb majored in accounting and numbers. Where Barb attended college is unknown, but it may have been Wake Forest College, where her future first husband, Rand Coleman Yates, was studying at the time. Wherever it was, she probably dropped out in 1961, when he graduated and married her. Her divorce report with Jerry and marriage certificate to Bob both say that she had not completed any years of college education. Cole and his various fathers. From approximately 1961 through 1980, Barbara lived in Richmond. At one point, she aspired to be an English teacher and occasionally filmed in for other teachers as a substitute. Ultimately, however, she ended up working in a series of secretarial roles, including at Reynolds Metals Company. Over the course of Barb's adult life prior to meeting Bob, she had relationships with 5 men, 3 of whom are known by name. Barbara gave birth to Cole in 1963. Wow, hang on a minute. Cole is the same age as my mother. That's kind of surprising. Throughout his life, Barbara has lied to Cole about who his father is. Based on his experiences with various stepfathers, Cole thinks that Barbara has a proclivity to isolate herself via scurrilous mates. The use of scurrilous is this statement makes no sense, suggesting Cole tries to use big words to impress people, a family trait perhaps. It's not even something that's even lost on Cole, because Chris uses this a lot to varying effects. Ran Coleman Yates. Records found by Cole in Richmond show that Bob married one Ran Coleman Yates on June 17, 1961. Yates was born on the 27th of December 1939 in Pittsylvania County, Virginia, but grew up in South Hill, a town about 35 miles east of Red Oak, which also happens to be the hometown of Bob's mother Carrie and her moonshiner dad. Yates graduated from Parkview High School from South Hill in 1957, and later that year he was enrolled at Wake Forest College in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, now Wake Forest University. An Alpha Sigma Phi brother, he graduated from Wake Forest with a BA degree in Human Resources Management before April 1961, a few months before he and Bob married. Coincidentally, Bob Chandler was also living in Winston-Salem around the same time, where he was married to Patricia Faye Harley and working as an engineer. According to their marriage certificate, Ran, a personal technician for DPT, was living in Richmond at the time of the marriage, while Bob, a secretary, was still living in Red Oak. Although, however, 2 newspaper articles from April and June 1961 stated that Bob was already living in Richmond. They were married at a Baptist church in Williamsburg, Virginia, near Red Oak, which the divorce documents misspell as Cilliarsburg. A divorce was granted to Bob on the 15th of May 1963, at which point she was pregnant with Cole and living in Richmond. The decree states that Ran deserted her on the 28th of April 1962, although the final digit in 1962 appears to have been altered from a 3. The divorce license lists 0 children. Cole was born 2 months later on the 24th of July 1963, so ran away, didn't he? That's the only way you can put it. To further fuel Cole's rage, Yates would visit him during his childhood and be introduced as a friend of the family. After Cole hired a private detective, Barbara hung up on him when he called to ask about his father. Yates later remarried and died aged 67 on the 6th of June 2007. His obituary in the Richmond Times-Dispatch makes no mention of Cole or Bob, although it indicates that Ran had a grandson also named Cole. Per the Cole-Smithy emails, it appears that Bob's nickname for Ran was Ramblin' Randy, although there is a slim chance that nickname refers to another ex-lover of Bob, whom we know nothing about. Jack Smithy. Barb insists that Cole's father is Jack Dale Smithy, to whom she claims she was once married. However, Cole was unable to find a marriage license for the couple or any photographs from their alleged wedding. Indeed, historians have been frustrated in their efforts to locate any such evidence. Their ability and persistence in documenting everything Chris adjacent rivals that of any private detective. In 1995, Cole's friend, syndicated cartoonist Ted Roll, made an internet post questioning the whereabouts of Jack Dale Smithy. According to the post, Smithy lived in Richmond in 1963, the year Cole was born, and was a merchant marine. He later worked as a trucker for Pilot Trucking in North Carolina, but had not been heard of since 1964. Cole eventually hired a private detective who tracked down Jack Smithy in Sarasota, Florida. Although there is no hard evidence that Barb was ever married to Jack, newspaper articles from the 1960s indicate that she used the surname Smithy up until she married Jerry Harmon in 1968. According to Barbara, as quoted by Chris, She and Jack had a fancy wedding, which was attended by her sisters and mother. Chris told Cole that Barbara considers Jack a total drunk and loser. In July 2021, in the middle of his incestuous affair with her, Chris asked Barbara about her relationship with Jack. Short story of it is that Jack and Barbie went out, sexed up, knocked her up. Then he hit the road, was not in it to be a daddy. The life on the open road called out to him more. That's apparently Chris's views on somebody who decides to completely run off away from somebody that he made pregnant because it wasn't worth the responsibility or effort or time. Chris also mentioned that no photos of Jack were kept at home, though they did have photos of Jerry. Jack died in 2010 at the age of 81 in Winston-Salem. Jerry Harmon. Walter Jerome Jerry Harmon Jr. was Barbara's second or third ex-husband, and the alleged sinister stepfather of Cole Smithy, Chris's older half-brother. Jerry was born on July 1st, 1931 in Springfield, Massachusetts, but grew up in Millboro, Virginia, and later Richmond. Jerry's father died when he was 18 months old. Much like Bob, Jerry had a technical background. He had graduated from Capital Technology University, then Capital Radio Engineering Institute in Laurel, Maryland, and worked as a broadcast engineer at a local radio station, WRVA, around 1950. In April 1951, Jerry fathered a child, out of wedlock with Nancy Louise Jantos. The mother offered the child up for adoption until she and Jerry married in September of 1951. The couple eventually regained custody of their baby in 1953 following a legal case, Harmon v. Damo, that was taken all the way to the Virginia Supreme Court. At some point, Jerry ended up in the military, which Cole has written about in 2 articles. According to Cole, Jerry was a combat medic during the Korean War, before switching his role to train his soldiers in specialized combat techniques, such as decapitation using piano wire with watermelons standing in for actual heads during this training. He was also a captain in the Civil Air Patrol and would pilot planes during and after the Korean War. One time, he was injured after crash landing his plane during a fighter pilot mission in Korea. According to the adoption court case records, Jerry wished to further study medicine at the University of Richmond, though it is unclear if this ever happened. Somewhat ironically, while married to Bob, Jerry served in different roles with the Richmond, Virginia Mental Health Association, where he was known for building a model of the human nervous system which he brought to speaking engagements. Barbara claims to have married Jerry after her relationships with Jack Dale Smithy and Rand Coleman Yates. However, in the course of Cole's investigation into his family history, he was unable to find a marriage certificate. That being said, there is a divorce record which claims that Jerry and Barbara married on the 18th of June 1968 in Washington, D.C., and divorced on the 7th of January 1980, after 1 year of living apart. 3 weeks before Bob had divorced his wife, Patricia, in a Facebook comment from 2020, Cole claims that Jerry adopted him in 1966. I grew up in an abusive household with Barbara and my former stepfather Jerry, where physical and mental punishments ran the gamut, from bare-ass beatings to cold showers to bizarre scenarios acted out with glee by 2 deeply neurotic adults. Even at a very young age, I knew that they would abandon me. They were both irresponsible and incompetent parents who exposed me to traumas that I would rather not remember. He might not have been the best dad, but Jerry was a humanitarian as evidenced by his actions. In both his articles, Saturday Night Special and Operation Snowball, My First Career in Show Business, Cole would further elaborate on his first stepfather in his early life and later life. According to Cole, Jerry was a professional magician for decades. Since he was 20, was a dedicated Freemason, and was an active member of the Invisible Lodge. Jerry lived with Barbara in a second-floor apartment adjacent to the campus of Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond during the early 1970s. Jerry allegedly kept a gun in his nightstand drawer, which his stepson would play with, and was out cheating on his wife when an intruder came to the apartment, forcing Barb to retrieve and fire the gun to scare them off. The shot ricocheted off the floor and the apartment's steel door and nearly killed Cole as a result, hitting the wall a hair's breadth behind his head. Cole would later remove the first article from his blog. Cole describes how Jerry, Bob, and himself took part in an annual traveling magic show which performed at mental hospitals and veteran hospitals in Virginia every Christmas season from 1967 to 1976. The trio performed under the name of King Connacht, Barbie, and Cole. Each show would end with Jerry chopping off Bob's head with a guillotine. During this time, and later of his life, Jerry worked as a radio announcer for WEZS radio station. Cole claimed the former Virginia governor, Mills Godwin, would pilot them around in a Cessna twin-engine plane to their magic show, and Jerry would sometimes pilot the plane. Cole would further elaborate more about Jerry. He was an ambulance driver for the Richmond Volunteer Rescue Squad. He also taught police recruits standard first aid before he began working for the mental health agency headquartered at Monument Avenue. Cole even said that Jerry cared about mental health movements so much that the whole purpose for the magic performance at local hospitals were to provide entertainment for the patients, war veteran patients, and mentally ill patients. Aside from this, Jerry was also the owner of his own company, Connacht Enterprises, which specializes in production work, special effects, and entertainment. Interestingly, Jerry married a woman named Rose Lenora Lotz in 1981, whom he first met while she was employed as an assistant for his King Connacht act, suggesting that she replaced Bob in more ways than one. That's some life that Jerry must have lived, despite the fact that it just didn't work out and they got divorced in 1980, I suppose. Life with Bob. He is only interested in making things look like he did them. It was his idea. I really didn't have anything to do with it. Even when I help him, I get no credit for anything. He never gives me credit to my face. Or if he's talking to anybody else, just like he tells you sometimes, well, I don't get no help from your mother. Bob ranting about her husband to Chris. Bob and Barbara met at Maddie's pub in Richmond, probably Matt's British pub in Shoko Slip, where Bob was a sing-along leader. One night in 1979, Barbara was there with friends and Bob was singing. Cole's friend Chuck, who worked at the bar, vividly recalled the pair being a pair of drunken dumbasses. According to Chris, Barbara did the pursuing. She chased him down the hall. They married in 1980. Chris claims that Barbara, in her own words, married him because he owned a house. Later that year, Bob was transferred from Richmond to Charlottesville. They settled in the outlying suburb of Ruckersville. Barbara worked for years as a financial secretary for numerous companies and businesses, included Virginia Power, VEPCO, today called Dominion Energy, and First North American National Bank, partnered with Circuit City. In September of 1993, Chris and Bob moved from Ruckersville to Chesterfield County near Richmond so that Chris would be able to attend middle school at a mainstream school. Barbara did not accompany them and remained in Ruckersville. Chris claimed that the separation allowed Barbara to continue working at her job until retirement and that she still visited Bob and Chris every weekend during the time she lived separately from them. After going into retirement, when Chris was in the 8th grade, so early 1996, Barbara came to live with her husband and son in Chesterfield. With both Barbara and Bob retired, they spent their twilight years from 2000 onward living in their Ruckersville home with Chris. It is difficult to ascertain what their relationship was like, but sources such as the tour of the house would suggest that Chris's parents neglected the family home and spent most of their time apart in separate areas of the house. According to Chris, Barbara had not had sex with Bob for at least 2 decades before his death. They began sleeping in different rooms sometime around the mid-2000s, because they're not as close as they should, used to, or can be. It can be presumed that as they got older, they grew more distant, but never to the point of wanting a divorce. Barbara became a widow on the 6th of September of 2011 when Bob died. Treatment of Chris. Okay, so here we go. This is like where things like really become... Because if one thing is being asserted... We know quite a number of things so far, is that Barbara had something of a promiscuous reputation by her own family, and she didn't necessarily have the best success with some men who, well, it pretty much spoke for itself, from the fact that she doesn't even know who Cole Smithy's dad is. At least Jerry was there, I suppose. Treatment of Chris. Well, technically Ran was as well, but probably, I don't know. Abuse and manipulation. And he told me of Mom saying she was going to pack up and leave the house. Then I ran downstairs, finding her on the couch. She was so miserable and sad. She talked of wanting to die. You don't even have to change my clothes. You can just bury me in what I have on. I was so sad and crying and so sorry for the way I misbehaved. We hugged and made up a bit. Which is something that Barbara does a lot, but we'll get into more of that. Bob had a long history of abusing and or manipulating her children. For example, she has often used threats of the S word to guilt Chris into obeying her whims. When Bob and Chris once tried to discuss cleaning the hoard with Bob, she responded by threatening the S word. She also threatened the S word to her family during the Ivy saga, supposedly as a response to the stress she was going through. In an episode from 2011, Chris failed to book himself a hotel room for MagFest due to being broke and planned to sleep in his car. Bob prevented him from going by pointing out that the crime risk and chilly temperatures, threatening to lock him out of their house, claiming that she would pack up and leave, and later told him she wanted to die. After Chris folded and went to his room to cry about it, she gave him a half payment of a copy of DC Universe Online to make up for not allowing him to go. Later that year, after Chris became a tomgirl, Bob tried to stop him from wearing dresses and makeup by telling him she feared he would kill her. She then ordered him to sit down and she cut his hair. It also appears that Chris's diet is not a concern for Bob, however. The night after the Chandler Hamlet family moved back to Ruckersville, Bob and Chris refused the spaghetti dinner offered by Bob. As a response, Bob decided to forego cooking for her family and has not made a meal for Chris since then. Although it must be said, I don't think you could make a meal in that house because there was barely any access to the kitchen, but we'll discuss that when we actually discuss the actual house itself. In addition, Barb has used the spectre of old age for her own game. By manipulating Chris into thinking she will have a heart attack, this tactic has been used so that Chris will panic and call 911 if Bob does not answer the phone when he calls her to check up on when he is out of the house. When Bob and Chris were both arrested for assault and battery, Chris was extremely worried about her health, saying in an email, "My mother fought the police in my defense, and she was handcuffed and I was emotionally distraught. I screamed and screamed and screamed, until an ambulance came for my mother to take her to UVA hospital. She was okay, but her blood pressure was high. I prayed a lot to Jesus for my release and safe return home with my mother, and I banged the cell door with both my feet while lying on a folding mattress on the floor to get those bastards to let me see and talk to my mother." It just straight up sounds like something from Psycho, doesn't it? Only after seeing my mother in her suit pass by my second cell did I start to calm down. I was really worried about my mother and her health. She needed me, and I needed her. The man in the pickle suit summed up Chris's relationship with Bob. Well, I don't think they talk very much. However, no, Chris is Bob's hand servant. She screams for him and he comes running. She has him change the newspaper the dog shit on. She has him run errands to bring her stuff, and she has used him used to have him haul her Goodwill crap to her car, and then from the car into the house. I think Bob's yelling has gotten much less frequent nowadays. It seems like she's pretty feeble nowadays. Chris is just as scared of Bob as he used to be, though. I don't think he realizes how much power he has over Bob nowadays. They're really physically affectionate in a strange way. Chris is pretty touchy-feely with a woman because of habits he learned by spending time with Bob. After Bob died, Bob's abuse of Chris escalated. She treated him as a slave and forced him to be on call at all times. Around 2013, she forced Chris to move out of his bedroom, specifically so she could bark orders at him efficiently, by throwing a tantrum and wrecking his possessions. A few months to a year before the fire, Chris stopped being permitted to sleep separately from Bob in his bedroom. He had to sleep closer to Bob, because she needed to be able to yell for him to go to Sheets and buy her crap, and he wasn't able to hear her up in his bedroom. He kind of tried to resist at first, but then she got super pissed and threw a tantrum. She wrecked his whole room and flipped everything over because he was trying to sleep on his own. Financial exploitation. She is also being very annoying. Christine, let's put this random good item on eBay. I really need the money for not only my bill payments, but also we need more food here. I am greedy too. Oh, you sold something of yours? I want $50 for that. She is constantly pestering and bugging me. Nowadays, nearly every time she comes downstairs to talk or chill, my impulsive subconscious feeling of her presence is cringe and, oh no, she's gonna bug me again about daft finances. Again. I mean, considering the situation they were in, it should have been Chris's initiative to get them out of it, considering Bob was retired and she blowed out her entire inheritance from her husband on by hiring a lawyer that they didn't need. Also, if Chris was really that pissed, then why he didn't think about just moving out of the house is, another point that he doesn't really seem to have come on the point of mentioning. So, there's that. Pampering. Yeah, but then my mom is pretty much jealous of me loving another woman more than her. Yes, dear. Jesus Christ. And Bob, what's this? Bob answers on a parenting quiz. Oh shit, what is this? Parenting interview, 19th of 19th of February 1999. Why do you choose to have children? I can't read this. To mice to have bites. What it by Christine West? Christine. Okay. To have. Okay. How did you decide how many children to have? I thought it would be nice to have no more. Do you know the basic facts about pregnancy and childbirth before you experience them? Where did you get the facts? Yes, I'm from books. Where did you get most of your information on child rearing? Learned both parents' intelligence and figured it out that it's a bit emotional error. I can't read that. I'm going to suggest that it probably wasn't. It didn't work. According to Cole, but. Okay, I'm definitely going to have to censor this part. According to Cole, Bob and Barbara left Chris alone every day for years with the abusive babysitter while going out drinking, effectively ignoring the manifestation of earliest symptoms of autism. After Chris's initial diagnosis, and after their negligence was inevitably thrown back in their face, Barbara resorted to any means necessary to coax Chris into talking, most notoriously by bribing him with toys. Now, in case you're wondering right now, I can't show what's actually on screen right here, but oh god, I can't even describe it. Oh, it is. Oh no, I wish I hadn't saw that. That's. While both of Chris's parents are largely responsible for his current state, Barb has more often than not been the most active in protecting Chris from recognizing any failure or shortcoming on his part, doing everything from being his sole commission with Cutco to going as his date to his senior prom. This pattern of accountability continues even into Chris's adult years. On at least 2 occasions, most notably after he was banned permanently, Barbara visited the game place, attempting to protect and defend her little snowflake and arguing his case with Michael Snyder, but to no avail. As first evidenced by the gameplay /4chan picture incident, she is extremely paranoid regarding Chris's online misadventures, likely because she fears that he'll get arrested and go to prison. Given some of the violent states of some of his videos and Chris's track record, she is probably not too far from the truth. She may also suspect that Chris is the P word as well, as she thought it was possible that he may have fallen for a To Catch a Predator-esque sting operation during the Julie fiasco. She even seems to suspect that Megan Schroeder, one of the few women Chris has known who was not out to troll him, is partially responsible for the persecution he has endured over the years. She does her part to keep his activities under control by acting as Chris's personal concierge, as seen when she interrogated Ivy for about half an hour before letting her speak to Chris. Barbara constantly babies Chris and tells him how handsome he is. She also told Chris that the reason he often blanks out or gets confused is not that he is an absent-minded, slothful buffoon, but that he is a creative genius and is simply overwhelmed by having so many creative ideas, but succeeds in doing literally putting any of them in practice. However, it seems that Barb has her limits. Like Bob, she was ashamed of Chris's effeminate escapades, claiming that she did not raise a daughter and that tomgirl is not a thing. She tried and failed to get Chris to stop wearing a bra and panties, even offering to pay him to stop. Intimate behavior. From Little Big Planet Autism Tutorial Part 2, Chris advised the parents of autistic children to give them hugs even if they don't want to, and mentioned that Bob had never stopped hugging him as a child, even when he didn't want to, and then eventually felt the love. Some children with ASD struggle with physical closeness regardless of the context. This experience may have decreased Chris's sense of personal space and boundaries, thinking that it's normal to hug and kiss and touch females without their consent, even after they have explicitly told him not to. I myself did have dreams of having sex with my mother. One result of Bob's parenting choices, as explained by Chris in August 2016. To cap off their relationship, Chris revealed in private conversations with multiple people that Bob has spooned with him. Jesus Christ. From Arthur Spatchcock on Chris sharing a bed with his mother. Storytime kids. Now most of us are aware of the fire. How Bob and Chris were displaced for some time while the house was getting renovated. You know how Chris was all whiny about his Legos, right? Some getting melted, shit like that. Well, he kind of let out that his own bed was ruined as well, given it had years of grease soaked into it, because not bathing is so chic in his eyes. So when they get back home, Chris didn't have his own bed anymore, so he was sharing one with Bob instead. This came with the horrifying addendum that Bob wanted to spoon with him. I don't know if he was a little spoon or big spoon, but I know she was unimpressed, and one night just unloaded on him angrily enough that Chris decided to get his own bed with his own money. So it goes without saying that from the time Chris and Bob got back home until he got that grand, he was sleeping in the same bed as his own mother. Sorry, just a little bit of sick just came up. In August 2016, the man in the pickle suit, Marvin, observed Chris and Bob in public during a court hearing. Bob and Chris are way too physically intimate. It's one thing to describe their creepy relationship, it's quite another to watch it in real life. They hold hands and Chris is always putting his arm around her and rubbing her shoulders sensuously. That's the shit I do to someone if I want to bang, not a family member. It's weird. I'm not a Bates. Oh my god. Chris in... No, he absolutely is. And this is just... The horror. The horror. Damn. Why does it look like Chris just swallowed a snooker ball and it just got stuck in it for a chin? Bob's habit of cuddling with Chris had been going on since Bob was alive, and he knew of it, but due to Bob's manipulation, he was not able to stop her. In August 2016, Chris admitted to having incestuous fantasies with Bob, prompting further analysis of their uncomfortably intimate relationship. Chris sometimes referred to her as dear or darling, as he usually does for would-be sweethearts. In his April 2018 Twitch stream, when Chris got his mother to reluctantly say, "Turn me loose, you silly goose," after hugging him, he commented that she used to do that more flirtingly. I know it's like 20 past 10 at midnight and I've got work tomorrow, but I think I need a shower before, like, for a very... I might bring a chair in there as well, because I don't feel good right now. In June 2021, not long before his incestuous relationship with his mom allegedly began, Chris, completely unprompted, claimed in a Facebook post that he and Bob had never slept in the same bed. Also, during the time my mom and I slept in my bedroom, we slept in separate furniture. She slept on the couch and I slept in the bed. She and I never ever had slept in the same bed together during those short months between 2011 and 12. Never in the same bed. Throughout 2021, Chris was feeling several instances of sexual frustration, hitting on several women of interest. It has gone to the point where Chris would release all of his sexual tension on Barbara in mid-June, where he would continuously have sexual intercourse with her every 3 days. The context in which this has all happened is hazy at best, as information on the affair primarily came from an infamous call where he describes incestuous acts, and a few leaked chats with Chris had with people throughout his affair with Barbara. Chris would hint at having such an affair online, calling Barbara a sweetheart over 50. Sometime after Fiona had leaked a chunk of the call on a Discord server, which would soon after be posted onto various websites by her friends, several concerned observers would contact authorities about the affair, leading to his arrest. Bob spent the next few years after her son's arrest either living with relatives or back at 14 Branch Lane Court. Once Chris's charges were fully dropped, he was seen returning to his place of residence. Try not to think too hard about that. Why didn't Chris just think about moving to Florida as well? Isn't like the elderly population, even in Pensacola, meant to be like extremely high? Why didn't Chris just go there and bang some old people there? I don't know. Health problems. Mental. Bob is understood by most to be a highly unstable woman, and worryingly, many of her behaviours can also be observed in Chris. Many believe her to be selfish and extremely narcissistic, on account of her baseless belief that she is descended from Tudor high nobility, and the pathological manner in which she lies and assigns blame to others, even in instances where the fault clearly lies with her. All of these traits are shared by Chris, with Bob's apparent encouragement. Additionally, many aspects of her relationship with Chris are consistent with narcissistic motherhood, which is a fascinating but complex topic, too lengthy to be discussed here in detail. Although Chris seems to be her golden child, she does not shy from mistreating him if he displeases her. This can be seen in an email to Jackie from May 2011, to which Chris claimed that his mother flew into a rage over his tomgo inclinations, forcing him to submit to a haircut and threatening to kill him. Aside from her narcissism, Barb is also infamous to Christorians for her hoarding. During Chris's youth, she would create piles of clothes as tall as her son. Chris has labelled her a pack rat, and on more than one occasion has indicated his displeasure at her hoarding and the consequent state of their house, although neither he nor Bob are known to have ever seriously challenged it. Barb compulsively hoards her purchases, particularly from Goodwill, which by 2009 had rendered the living room uninhabitable. When Bob was admitted to the hospital for the final time, he was quarantined for bug bites, ostensibly due to the conditions in the Chandler household. The situation did not improve after Bob's passing either. A second house tour video, made by Chris in 2013, revealed that Bob's hoarding had gotten severe enough to render entire rooms completely inaccessible, with some rooms literally full of stuff to within inches of the ceiling, and others reduced to crevices carved into walls of junk. Bob's hoarding was predicted by many to lead to disaster, and finally did on the 10th of January 2014, when Chris accidentally started a house fire in the morning while trying to brew coffee in the bathroom. Because the kitchen had been among the rooms blocked off by Bob's junk, naturally Bob's hoard provided ample kindling for the fire, and the house was severely damaged before the fire could be contained. In fact, given the state of the house in the second tour video, it's surprising that Chris and Bob were able to escape. Unsurprising, however, is the fact that one of Chandler's remaining cats died in the blaze, and one of the firefighters sent to the scene also suffered unspecified injuries. While the Chandlers relocated, pending repairs to their home, Bob's stuff went into storage. When repairs were completed a year later, Bob had all of it moved back to 14 Branch Lane Court, and is not known to have disposed of it, even though, by all accounts, most of what she and Chris were able to salvage was subjected to either fire, smoke, or water damage, rendering it completely useless. This was confirmed in April 2017, when Chris mentioned the laundry room contained a mountain pile of 20 to 40 bags of dirty, damaged clothing that had not been washed since the fire occurred. Once again, the smell of that house must have been dreadful, but maybe if I was Chris or Bob, you would probably have ceased to notice it after a while. Bob has also been long speculated to suffer from a form of dementia due to later video appearances, mostly begging videos, showing her as struggling with forming sentences without a degree of prompting by Chris. Some initially speculated that Chris and Bob were taking advantage of her feeble, elderly state for the purpose of emotional manipulating their audience into giving them more donations out of pity, as there were other videos where Bob appeared to be more cognizant and seemed to be able to handle her own finances to some degree. Some people close to Chris, such as the captain, have proclaimed her to not have dementia. She's fully there mentally. She can drive, hold a conversation, etc., but yeah, I can't explain the damn stare. However, the statement was made in 2018, and it's possible in the following years that she has developed a form of cognitive disability. In light of the incest situation, in which Chris noted that she seemed partially confused on at least one of the occasions that he jumped her bones, how much of her situation was an act, presumably if any of it was, and how much is real has been called into question. Bob was evaluated at a hospital after being separated from her son, and was also able to return to her home after he was incarcerated, though it should still be noted that the bar from being deemed qualified enough to take care of oneself is rather low. A later visit by Chris's fans, where Bob did not know that she was being recorded, may have demonstrated that she has a degree of difficulty with cognitive function, or at least that she suffers from hearing loss. This would also somewhat explain the reason behind the November 2021 traffic collision that she was involved in, where she failed to yield the right-of-way and got T-boned by a tractor-trailer on the driver's side. Since then, she's presumably had to rely on senior caregivers and extended family to live off, since her youngest is too preoccupied with other matters to take care of her. In June 2022, a letter from Chris confirmed that Bob is suffering from a falling mentality, although it's not clear what that entails. Wait. Like Chris, Barbara was obese at the time of his discovery by the internet. As late as the 1990s, Barbara was reasonably slim, but she, along with Chris, ballooned out as the 2000s rolled along, to the point of resembling English serial killer Rose West. I'm glad that thing was not just lost on me. I thought she looked a little bit like Rose too. Her massive size earned her the affectionate nickname Snorlax from the trolls. Barb's size may have led to her sleeping a lot, and usually skipping church. However, according to eyewitness reports, Barbara lost weight in 2012. Her weight loss is visible in photos Chris took of her at the 2012 Mythbusters tour stop in Washington, D.C. This has continued into her old age, when she attended Chris's court hearings throughout 2015. Historians in attendance invariably noted that although she has lost weight, she appears to have low muscle mass, probably due to her sedentary lifestyle. In particular, at his last hearing, it was noted that Barb appeared to be growing increasingly frail and possibly senile, as she did not present as very responsive, and appeared much more submissive to Chris than she has otherwise known to be. Chris also repeatedly got short with her due to her poor hearing. In 2018, Chris decided to cash in on the Snorlax joke, claiming that his mother found it funny. He listed a plush Snorlax for sale on eBay at $200. Hey everyone, those in the meme know the times when my mother used to be large and lazy. Everyone called her a Snorlax. Well, Barbara likes the joke too, and can laugh it off as she is doing a lot better these days. So, one time only, she signed a Snorlax plush, and you could own it at 20% more awesome collectible. A personal certificate or letter of authenticity will be included. Thank you. Holy buttocks. In a tweet to Cole from June 29, 2013, Chris tells him that he ought to have been here putting bandages on their mother's holy buttocks. It was not clear exactly what sort of problem this referred to, though it hardly sounds pleasant. On October 14, 2013, Chris elaborated in a Facebook post stating, "My mother stresses me with her continuous rants about her damn miniature scaby flies, her suffering low finances, and shit." The consensus was that the so-called holy buttocks were in fact liaisons. It is now believed that Barbara has or had a colony of parasitic mites, rather than flies, that have burrowed into her prodigious posterior. Oh god, they were. Oh god, she had flies in her. Let's move on. Naturally, while Barb is being eaten alive by parasites other than Chris, her child whines about having to take care of her. Dental. In August 2014, Chris begged for money on Facebook, supposedly to pay dental fees, as he claimed his mother had cavities in her teeth that needed treatment. In July 2016, Barb herself begged for money. Chris and Barb restated begging for dental money in early 2018. Hearing loss. During Chris's 2014 court hearing from pepper spraying a GameStop employee, Marvin was in attendance and observed Chris imply that Barb had hearing loss. After a bit, the PD went up to the judge and they called Chris up. Chris starts getting impatient with Barb. He said something like, "Are your ears clogged up?" And then, "Want to follow me so you can hear what's going on?" Then she got up and trundled up there to accompany Chris. On the 20th of September 2021, Reddit user Electric Thunder visited 14 Branch Lane Court and had a brief conversation with Barb, during which Barb had difficulty understanding what was being said. Memory loss. In the July 2021 incest texts, Chris claimed that Barb has memory problems, and that his incestuous acts were helping to heal her. She has had memory problems at time beforehand, yes, but she is better stimulated in her mind and soul, and it really shows. Her mental processing speed is even going back up. Not at all possible. Aging. They treat you very badly in there, so she would never want me to put her into a home, and I would not do that. In a November 2015 Family Needs to Appreciate Family was uploaded to YouTube. The video is a plea to Cole Smithy, David Ann Chandler, and Coral Suzanne Chandler to visit Barb before her time runs out, even though the latter two are not Barb's progeny. On the 13th of July 2016, Barb unexpectedly starred in one of Chris's e-begging videos. In the minute-long video, she speaks slowly and almost inaudibly, hardly moving or blinking for the entirety of the video. While some have voiced concerns that this may be an early sign of dementia, it is just as likely that Barb, being a manipulative narcissist, was putting on an act for money. She has since reappeared in numerous other e-begging videos from Chris, including multiple in August 2018. Her appearance is frail and quite frazzled, and her sentences are often punctuated with tons of ums and ers, along with extended pauses. In August 2016, Anna McLaren posted a photo on Facebook of herself and Barb together. In it, Barb appears to have aged significantly since her last appearance in the Donations Further Requested Please video. In November 2016, Barb escaped injury when she slipped and fell. Chris has been increasingly tasked with helping Barb around the house in her elderly age. He stated in April 2017 that he was taking caregiving classes. Barb is seen in Minor Update Handouts, a begging video, in which Chris demands money because Barb drinks constantly costly meal replacement shakes, possibly referring to a drink such as Ensure. Other. In October 2009, Barbara spent her birthday at the hospital with what the Chandlers thought was food poisoning. Barbara was diagnosed with colitis, a gastrointestinal disease categorized by the inflammation of the colon. It manifests in diarrhea and cramps. Which kind of colitis has yet to be determined. It seems the Chandler's family diet has finally come to affect her, and in order to survive, she will have to change her eating habits. Considering their stubbornness, this clearly will end badly. Hearing the plight of the Chandler family, fans of Solitude created the website Barbara Chandler Has AIDS to spread awareness regarding AIDS and to collect donations for research foundations and charities. Chris himself denied the rumour. On the 23rd of August 2013, Chris claimed that Barbara had been afflicted with breast cancer but managed to survive. He did not give details about when she was diagnosed with the ailment, at what stage it was, or what kind of treatment Barb received. In November 2020, Chris mentioned that Barb had an appointment with a cardiologist. Legal problems. On the 28th of October 2011, Chris and Barb were caught in an incident with the game place, and were actually arrested with several serious charges, with Bob's including felony, assault and failure to stop. The two were later released on bail. After a succession of court hearings, Barb, along with her son, was arraigned on her felony charges on the 10th of July 2012. She was sentenced to community service and was put on a 2-year probation, as well as being ordered to pay Michael Snyder's medical bills. When informed of the latter fact during the trial, Chris explained that his mother, a retired obese 70-year-old woman, would take care of the charges for him. No one was particularly surprised at this revelation. Not even me. Financial problems. Barb lives off Social Security, her retirement insurance benefits, and a small pension from her old job, around $14,000 a year. In 2016, Barb was sued by a Discovery Bank in Norfolk for not paying debts. This came to light on March 14, 2016, when sharp-eyed Kiwis noticed that she had a hearing on the 16th of March. Since grave neglect on her debt was likely the cause of her being taken to court, it was widely assumed that she would ignore the summons too. Instead, once the court records were updated, many were surprised to see that she not only had Barb attended, but she had represented herself too. Equally unsurprisingly, this bold move failed to pay off, and Barb was still sentenced to pay $4,706.93. 5 months later, Barb was sued again, this time by Capital One for the same reason. The hearing in September resulted in a default judgment against Barb, meaning that she did not bother attending. She owes Capital One $15,906.99. Her out-of-control debt was the catalyst for the financial crisis of 2016. From June through July of that year, Barb has appeared in 3 videos. Donations required, serious, please help, Donations requested, please. Donations further requested, please. In the videos, she and Chris beg for donations, claiming to need money for her asthma medication and dental work, although they receive a combined amount of $2,500 per month from the government, and their costly hoards are clearly visible behind them. See the appearances section for more appearances by Barb. She has failed to take accountability for ruining the family's finances, trying to pin the blame on Chris, even though her known debt of over $20,000 is much larger than Chris's. She and Chris had an inheritance from Bob worth tens of thousands of dollars when he passed away, but Bob decided to frivolously spend it all on Rob Bell in an attempt to gain exoneration for her assault and battery charge. In the summer of 2018, she joined forces with Chris in selling stuff on eBay, including items from her hoard and her autographs, which some fans bought. Appearances in Sonichu. In Sonichu issue 0, Bob makes a brief appearance in classic Sonichu strips. In Sonichu issue 9, the male dating education students are given Barbara dolls to talk to. In the 2015 revisions to Sonichu issue 10, Chris wrote out Blanca's character and replaced her with his mother. According to the Wikipedia, Sandy Rosechew and Sonichu Rosechew's children go to Ann Weston Elementary School. It is unknown whether or not Sonichu and Rosechew's children still go to that school after their evolution. In Sonichu issue 11, Bob is photoshopped into a family photo alongside Chris, Bob, and various Chews. In Sonichu issue 12, Bob is in a set of pages that is a cross between Chris writing an autobiographical account of himself coming out as a tomgirl to his parents and tribute to his late father. Due to Chris's Oedipal complex, Barb is depicted as much more youthful than Bob, even though she was nearly 70 at the time. She's also drawn as being freakishly tall compared to Chris and Bob, despite being shorter than both in real life, though this may just be Chris's inability to keep his characters properly proportioned at work. Bob expresses surprise at her son's announcement of being trans. Chris states that she was hesitant for a long time, but got used to my subtle and more changes. This is a drastic understatement, as the real-life Bob tried to stop his tomgirl lifestyle in ways including threats, guilt trips by claiming that she was worried Chris would kill her, paying him to stop cross-dressing, and even ordering him to submit to a haircut. If her attitude towards him cooled, it was only out of resignation rather than acceptance. Evidence of this is when she became angry with him again after finding out that he had successfully changed his name in 2016. In August 2017, Chris unveiled a drawing of the Chandler family depicted as My Little Pony characters, saying that they will make further appearances in Sonichu issue 12-9. And you can also see Barbara depicted as toys and as an amiibo, I guess, and stuff like that. And here is just the list of, audio calls that she's been in over the years, as well as the videos, which, to be honest, most of them have been as a result of the financial crisis, and most of them are just sort of documents between what happened in the meantime. So that's just about everything we need to know, including the ones where it looked as if Chris was just getting too much into Bob's state, as it were. So this is all of Bob's pictures from her early years, through college, through work, through the Future Homemakers of America, Spanish Club, and Bob's 8th grade photo, freshman, sophomore, holding Chris. And as we get into color, more colors, 60 years old with Sonichu on it. And in later years, much later years, and this is the most recent one of her in 2023. And, well, I wish there was some fantastic way I could say that's just about that, but what else can I say, ladies and gentlemen? That, as they say, well, is that. And, well, like with Bob Chandler, I'm not entirely sure if there's like a particular way to end this positively or negatively, because, well, taking all that we know of Barbara into account, I'm merely just left with saying that she probably wasn't the nicest woman on earth. She probably did have quite a bad start in life. This doesn't excuse anything she did in later life. And it's also true the fact that her tactics are borderline evil. This doesn't excuse from what happened to her because of what Chris did, but we are also now having to contend with the fact that, well, how do we end this this whole thing off, and knowing that, well, Bob's future is still, well, incredibly uncertain as a woman in her early 80s. I've no idea, but I know this much. Don't go around thinking things of your own mother, ladies and gentlemen. That sort of thing never ends well. So all I can say to this is that look after yourselves, look after your parents, and, well, just don't do what Bob Chandler or Chris does. Just don't do any of those things. That's, I know, again, the no frigging duh solution, but what can I say? There's that. I'm running out of ways to summarize this up, so I'm just gonna end it there. So bye, I suppose, and I cannot wait to talk to you guys again in the next video. Take care, and bye-bye for now.